Hello, welcome to the field again. We're back with the Mini Talon. It's pretty spicy wind-wise at the moment. Feels like it's coming this direction, quite strong. Hopefully that's not going to have an impression, but yeah, I've patched this guy up. We've put a ReflyFPV Tank Solo in instead of that old VTX, repaired the camera, repaired the pitot tube, and when I went down here before the wheel came off, and I kind of thought I'd be able to get it, and of course since then it got ploughed, so we've got basically this orange 3D printed landing strip. I've also remembered my head tracker cable, so yeah, it's just a case of will it be okay in this wind, but it's a pretty big plane, so let's hope for the best, see what happens.
As that plane launches, I will say that I forgot to say one thing on the field, which was the main point of doing this, and that was to try and push the LQ from ELRS down to the vector, which I've managed to do. Now, it sat all that time on 98%, and when I looked at my radio it was 100%, and what I think has happened is the vector does its own thing. It decides to try and calibrate it to decide what's full signal and what's not full signal. I checked this out in the house. I literally put my radio in the microwave and closed the door, which sort of creates a barrier, and I could see then that the LQ on the OSD and the LQ on the radio would both drop about the same, but obviously the calibration, it's decided it's about 98% instead of 100. Now, what I noticed up here, and you can see I've taken off and we're flying about, I've forgotten two things. Firstly, I had my ReflyFPV VTX set at 25 milliwatts because when I was working on it in the house I wanted to try and keep it cool, and I noticed pretty quickly that I was like, oh, that's weird, I'm getting a little bit of a fizzle here, only sort of 200 meters away, and then I realised I'd left it in the low power basically. The other thing is I forgot to turn on the HD camera. I've got a little 1080p camera that I can record on, which is probably better to look at than the OSD, so I figured I'd have to land, but I did do just a bit of checking out on the pan to make sure it would move both manually and with my head tracking on. I suppose head track on this one is a little bit underwhelming because I only got a single pan servo, so all I can do is look left or right, which doesn't seem too different from doing it on a pot on the radio really. If you can have a pan tilt and you can look all around, I'm sure that would be better. Anyway, I decided to land this, which is not that easy because the wind up here is really, really strong. It was pretty strong on the ground, it's actually even stronger, and you can see that with the speed variance. You will see me slow way down to under 20 kilometers an hour and then go over 100 kilometers an hour depending which way I go. It actually took me a few goes to land. That wind was really creating some lift, so I'm trying to get down, I'm trying to put myself into wind, and all that happened is I end up just increasing altitude. There's a couple of metal detectorists in the field as well, so I have to be quite careful to pick my landing spot as they're moving up and down. I don't want to hit them with a plane. But eventually I get my approach right. I've got to come down really low here and then turn diagonally into wind, and we're on a glide for so long, but I can really strip the speed off pretty well. It's just a hell of a long walk to go get it after all this. So I've gone for something a little different here. You'll notice when I'm normally showing you the OSD, some bits are blacked out, and that's because there's a certain amount of privacy in the location I fly from and stuff. Also, the OSD isn't great to look at because of course that's 640 by 480, so what I thought I'd do is take the HD footage I got, sync up the OSD with it, and then just pull various bits out. So just to explain what we got here, we've got in the top left the voltage, the amp hours drawn, the time we've been flying. You notice I just landed that battery and took straight off again, I didn't change it, and the flight mode we're in. You'll notice when I took off I was in RTH. I throw it up, line of sight, pop it in RTH, get the goggles sorted out, and then put it in whatever mode I want. 2D is the equivalent of having stabilization, and then you'll see 2D hold or something like that. That means it's trying to hold its altitude as well. In the middle there we've just got the home arrow and the amps we're drawing at the time. Top right, that's the RSSI percentage. Again, I'm pushing that through, and I don't know if the scaling's right, but that's what it is, and the number of satellites I've got there. The bottom right, the LQ, that really didn't change, but whenever I checked it on the radio, it didn't really change either. In the middle, a centre at the bottom there, you've got down the bottom the cumulative flight distance, and the one just above that is how far we are away at the moment. And then if we go to the bottom left, we've got two things for the speed, which is reasonably interesting. The bottom one is the ground speed, literally how fast we're travelling over the ground. And then the top one is the airspeed, which is quite an interesting one. We've got the pitot tube there so we can see the airspeed. So you will see if the ground speed is slower than the airspeed, then that generally means we're heading into a headwind. And if the ground speed is higher than the airspeed, it generally means the wind's behind us and we're flying faster than the airspeed. So all I was doing around here is having a bit of a fly around just to get a little bit of distance, and what I actually ended up doing is having a fly along the coast. Just before I show you that, I'll give you a demonstration of the speed. Here we're doing about 50 kilometers an hour ground speed, going slightly into wind. If I now turn that around for the same amount of amp draw, you'll see our speed jump up to over 100 kilometers an hour, over 120 in a lot of cases. It really was very gusty, much more than I thought it was, and we are clearing so much ground there. So here we are over the coast, just flying along there, and you'll probably see if you look at the bits of OSD there, we're getting a little bits of breakup at this sort of distance, which isn't too far by all means. I find it quite useful when this happens just to stay still and just rotate my head around a little bit, because there's a directional antenna, and if you get that facing the right way, then it picks the signal right back up again and you're good. Often though, you will just find bits of interference in random places, but you can just carry on flying through them. This seems fine in a fixed wing. It's a bit more scary if you're on a quad and you suddenly can't see anything, because you don't seem to have as much time to sort of react in a quad. It's all a bit scary and stuff. But yeah, the idea of this this flying was really just to make sure everything felt good and I felt that everything was working properly and I trusted the plane. The only problem with it is it's really windy out there, so I can't really keep in a very straight line as blowing all over the place. It's much more pleasant on a less windy day. You can just sort of float here for hours. In this sort of scenario, I was kind of being quite careful because you suddenly have to put in like a lot of amps to go against the wind and stuff. But yeah, it was flying really nicely. Just over the middle of the sea now, so I'm pretty much trusting it, and I can look back, see where I need to get back, straight in front of myself there. I like doing these turns where you look back over the wing, but in this wind again it seems very wobbly, very difficult to line yourself up, so I'm just sort of looking and enjoying the view, but pretty much turning back and just coming back facing the front. I didn't really do much on the head tracking because it was just literally just left to right, which is sometimes a little bit easier to do on a pot. As I said, I've got the Bixler that's got a pan tilt, so I must get that back in the air just to test out how that's going to go. So we've been in the air close to 20 minutes and I'm coming into land, and you might think this is a pretty weird thing to do because I'm kind of turning away, but the wind was so strong that I knew it was just going to push me right over to the other side of the field very quickly, and so all I needed to do was pretty much get to that corner of the field, line myself up in a diagonal and land, watching out for the metal detectors, of course. This one was slightly better and it wasn't quite such a walk, but yeah, we still had a really big glide, but a nice soft touchdown. Spot on. Well, a couple of flights there, one longer one, but it's not very pleasant. It is just too damn windy. Even for this pretty big plane, it was flying sideways most of the time, which isn't very pleasant, but everything worked. The LQ signal seemed fine, although it was 98 all the time. Although when I looked down at my radio it was always 100, so really hard to tell, and that's one reason I didn't bother with the Gemini system. It's like, it's already 100%, what's it going to do? Head tracking was fine, although if there's one thing I want with head tracking, it's the ability to reset it. I found myself, sometimes I turn with the plane if I've gone a different direction, and then head tracking goes out, and when it goes crazy there's no reset button to say recenter me here. The VTX was good once I got up to the right
getting blown away. The right milliwatts, and the skid thing worked. Look, it's covered in dirt now, so that's good, I think. Anyway, I'm going back home because this is pretty horrendous. Everything is blowing around. Back to base, I think. Well, we've come to the end of the video, and I'm kind of left thinking, will people know what this is about? Because it's not really about anything. It originally was about this, the BetaFPV 14 channel PWM ELRS receiver. But then did it become about using Rush FPV tank solo? Did it become about using head tracking? Or perhaps it was about pushing my telemetry in terms of LQ and RSSI down to the vector, the old legacy stuff? And the answer to those questions are both yes and no. Yeah, it was all about that stuff. And for a while I thought, oh, I'll put up a guide about how to push your LQ down to an old flight controller. And then I realised it was so unique to this one, it was a bit pointless. Although if enough people say, hey, I want to know, then I'll let you know. It was really about me just getting my plane flying nicely and checking it out and making sure it was all good to go for next time, because I just want to go fly it some more, basically. I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of products used and I'll put some links down below, but essentially this is just me flying my plane and making sure it's good. And that's the sort of kind of video I like doing these days. So keep watching if you want more of it. But yeah, there'll be a mix of product stuff and flying stuff and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, hope that was helpful or interesting, and I'll catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.